So okay, so you're not a free. So you work for you're under payroll CBC or
I've
you're
worked for CBC for like 32 years.
Okay, so like, what's your story then? Like,
What's my story?
like about I like, in journalism, like you started at CBC. So
I started in CBC in Montreal, then I worked for CBC in Regina, and then in Winnipeg, and then I spent 10 years covering Parliament Hill, traveled all over the world with Chrétien, with other various politicians. Then I spent almost 10 years doing international news based in Ottawa, like Africa, South America, all over the place, Afghanistan, yada yada. And then I was posted to Jerusalem, spent 4 years in Jerusalem, covering the Middle East during the Arab Spring, all that, and I've been in Beijing for almost 5 years now.
Okay. Sounds like a lot of very rich experiences that you've had.
It's a lot of stuff going on, yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's about it. And you, why did you end up in China as opposed to somewhere else? You said you were looking for something outside of Canada, right?
Yeah, I was. Thank you for the water. Thank you. Is she from Wuhan?
No, she's from Beijing.
Okay.
Well, just outside Beijing.
Mark, could you go a little bit to your left side?
Yeah, sure. Yeah, no, basically I was working in tech at the time, doing sales and marketing, but my background, education-wise, was in education.
That's what you mentioned, yeah, that's right.
Yeah, so
the China thing was...
So I wanted to live in a different country. I wanted to experience a different culture, learn a new language, and that was like my general requirement.
Right.
And then as I did research, I organically landed upon China because it seemed that like Middle Eastern countries, for example, they required at least 1 year of teaching experience on paper.
At that point you didn't have
I had zero. Like on paper, I had zero legitimate teaching experience. I'd worked with kids for 12 years by that point, but I had no legitimate teaching experience, right? So that's what I mean.
Yeah.
I also... I started an education program funded by a tech company where it was tech education in the community, but again, never taught. So Saudi Arabia, it's like, nah, because, you know, visas and stuff, right? So yeah, China basically you didn't need to have any experience to come to China. And then I
think that's changing now, right?
I've been hearing about this, but I've never seen any action.
They put out, I mean, you know, it's like many other things in China. Things get announced, laws get passed, things get tightened up, and then the actual implementation or enforcement is hit and miss until one day they decide that absolutely it has to be enforced, and so there's no other solution, and suddenly they crack down on something.
Yeah. So
they put out a list of what teachers, foreign teachers who are teaching in China need to have now. It's like a specific list of stuff. Whether they're enforcing it or not, I have no idea.
Yeah, so I'm in groups where job offers happen like all the time, like postings, job postings, and
is it like international schools? Is that what it is, or is it?
Mostly, they position themselves as international schools. They're Chinese businesses, but like in China, when you say international school, there isn't a definition for that.
I understand. But that's what it is basically. So
it's, they're a front-facing international school who's trying to recruit foreign teachers.
So they're private schools that are international.
Yes, exactly. And some are more international than others. There's an international high school in Hankou, where we are right now, and it's a British international school, and they're a top 10 international school.
There's one in Beijing. Like I think that's a
maybe, yeah. It's a top 10 international school for all of China.
Right.
But then you have Maple Leaf. Maple Leaf is actually initially was a Canadian-Chinese joint program, and they are also an international school, but their rigor is not as high as the British school.
Right. There's also a Canadian international school. It's a Chinese Canadian guy who owns them. A series of them. I don't think he's got one in Wuhan. There's one in Beijing and a few other places, Shenzhen, I think, and a few other places too. And they use the new runs with curriculum.
Okay.
And that's their selling point, that they actually teach with a Canadian curriculum, et cetera, et cetera. Mostly international.
So how have you come to know about international schools in China more?
Just from being here over the past 5 years and running into Canadians who do stuff. And I mean, education here is kind of a... There's two categories. There's this, which what we're talking about now, international schools teaching mostly foreign students, Korean students and whatever, in international schools, and the other side of that is trying to get Chinese students to go to Canada or to Australia or to Britain or wherever it is, because that's the other big industry here.
Yeah, absolutely. I was going to say, there's a word for that, a simple business term for that. But anyway, whatever, yeah, that's the idea.
I want to do a suggestion, because this is really bright.
Is it?
So I want you to sit here and Mark to look this way instead of this way. So you
is that better for you?
Yeah, it's
Okay,
better.
so sitting in the same spot, just turning the chair.
Yeah,
Okay.
just turn the chair a little bit, and you can put your chair there.
I will do that.
Oh.
So it takes a few minutes to get going.
Does this need to be out of the
No,
way,
it's okay.
or
No,
it's fine? Okay.
But if we get to the stage where it needs to be out of the way, we'll let you know.
So, are you a hiker?
Could you go more to the left?
Yeah, sure. Is this okay?
This is okay. Yeah.
You're wearing hiking shoes, that's why.
Oh, yeah, but they're the most practical things for getting around this place. I mean, I've explored China in different ways, but hiking as well as other things, the Great Wall, mostly up Yunnan by bike, stuff like that.
Cool. Oh, you're a biker.
I do that too. I'm not a
You stay in shape, clearly.
I'm not a hyper biker.
Yeah.
I'm not. I do a little bit of everything.
Yeah.
So it's kind of. I'm a runner. So hiking is fine. Biking is fine.
You also have a rower's body.
I
You have the long legs and you have the long arms.
Yeah, well, I didn't grow my legs. I sort of came like that. So the length of my arm, of my limbs, I had no control over.
Yeah.
All right. We can.
We're good?
Yeah.
Okay, good. There we go. Mainly, I want to ask you about a couple of things. I'm interested in what the experience has been. I'm just going to give you just an overview, just so you know what the experience has been being here since the beginning of this thing, and kind of the contrast and the experience of the lockdown, but also sort of the contrast between the lockdown and what you're living, the environment you're living in now, kind of thing.
Okay.
I'm more interested in kind of what it was like and giving people a sense of that, as opposed to the whys and the backgrounds and all of that, because I'm talking to a bunch of other people.
So
most
personal experiences.
Yeah, everybody else is Chinese essentially. So they give me, in a way, a better sense of the behind the scenes stuff in a way. But anyway, whatever. We'll talk.
But your focus, like at the beginning, and then now, like your big picture.
Yeah, both of those things. So I'll ask you first about what it was, what it was like in those first, whatever.
But stick to my personal experiences, because you said you don't want context, like the
Not
why.
so much.
The why. Yeah.
Yeah, no, not so much the why. It's more the yeah. So what was it like? And yeah, exactly. That's right. That kind of stuff is mostly
The why.
Because I think that's something that most Canadians don't really have a sense of. I mean, they may have read the whys and the explanations and all the rest of stuff, but I think they don't really have a sense of. They've only experienced the idea of a lockdown or something like a lockdown in very limited forms, not like a Wuhan. So whatever. Are we okay?
Yes.
Great. Okay. So, when did you first get the sense that something was, or rather, how did you first get the sense that something was going on here in terms of a virus, a sickness, a disease, an epidemic, whatever?
I was in the cafe with my girlfriend, and we were just getting some stuff done on our laptops, and she was reading news that was Chinese news, and she mentioned, there's some kind of virus going around, and I think at the time it was the story about the seafood market, and they released the information on the cases and stuff, and we're like, oh. I hope they're okay. Yeah, that was it. Life goes on.
When was that?
I can't give you a date because I don't
like,
remember.
Was it like mid-January, near New Year's?
No, so it would have been, okay. So do you remember when Spring Festival started?
23rd.
Okay.
Well, the week of Spring Festival started on the 23rd.
On the 23rd of...
I think the 24th.
January.
Yeah,
January, yeah. So it would have been, I think, the week before that.
Because the 23rd is when the lockdown was declared. So it would have been about
So it was the week before that I was off work for vacation. And we were spending one of our first vacation days together, actually. And then the seafood story came up. Yeah.
And it just popped up. So, okay, fine. So you say, okay, well, that's going on. And then what? Did it build up, or was the next thing you knew they were declaring a lockdown? What happened next?
It was gradual. So more reporting was done on the seafood market, because it was just the seafood market, right? And there was a virus in the seafood market.
Right.
When I first heard about it, I was just like, oh, somebody got sick. So they got a virus. We all get viruses, right? It happens. But there was more reporting in the news, and the other thing was there's the government news, but then there's the WeChat news,
right,
which is basically Chinese citizens just talking within that world. So the information and conversations were slowly growing as the news was putting out updates on what was happening. Concern wasn't really a thing until the cases started to spread. And I don't remember when the first death was or something like that. But the more those things got reported, the more we were like, oh, maybe this isn't actually a little seafood thing. Maybe this is actually a little bigger than that.
And so this is just a few days, like we're talking before the lockdown was announced. And I was in Beijing at the time. I remember there was only a few hours notice in terms of the lockdown itself. I think maybe 10 in the morning it was announced, and everything was closing at 10 at night or something like that. What happened that day?
The day of the lockdown?
Yeah.
Well, we knew at that point already that things were getting a lot worse, and that there was a Chinese doctor, you probably heard of him, who released some information before the government officially declared that this is a state of emergency. So that, when I was talking about, like, there's Chinese people talking on Weibo, which is the Twitter of China, and talking on WeChat, which is the WhatsApp / Facebook of China. People were talking about it. People got more concerned. So that was all building up. That all happened. I don't remember the facts and the details, but that was all building up. And then the day of lockdown, by the time the declare of lockdown happened, I wasn't totally shocked because I didn't really understand what it actually meant. But at the same time, it was like, whoa, there's over 10 million people in this city. What do they mean locked down? So I didn't really have an understanding of exactly what it meant. We knew at that point this must be very serious, because if the government of China is releasing official information saying they're shutting down an entire city of over 10 million people, this has to be very serious. Yeah. So I wasn't like scared. It was more just like, ooh, this is serious.
And okay, so that day they announced it. You're surprised to whatever extent, and you realize it's serious. Mm-hmm. What did it actually mean in practical terms for you that day? The next day?
So gradually the policies got more strict. So right away, I could leave my apartment. I could throw out my garbage. I could leave the premises. If I had to go to the grocery store, I could take my scooter, drive to the grocery store. That was the beginning of the lockdown. Because not even the government knew exactly what they were going to do. Because, like, yes, we knew this was considered a crisis at a local level. But again, it was like piece by piece, things started to change as the days passed. So again, I could leave, go to the grocery store, everything was fine, but everybody was at home. You could tell the Chinese people were at home, and the streets were quiet, and it was calm. But I wore a mask, I went to the grocery store, I came back, and that was that. The security guards let me come and go at that point.
And then, how did it build to something more serious?
I don't remember when exactly it happened, but how did it build? It was how did it build?
Yeah, how did it build?
Yeah, gradually. And then at some point, I don't remember when, it was like, so I guess how it would have happened was like, okay, everybody stay home, please. There's a virus in Wuhan, and maybe at some point people have died. I don't remember. Please stay home. Only go out when necessary. Okay. And then after that, it was like, okay, only go out during these times because we're trying to control how many people leave their homes at once. And then I think it moved to, this is good for me because I haven't actually reflected on this since it happened. Then it moved to, okay, if you are living in this community, you can go out for groceries on an odd day or on an even day. And then it went to, if this is your unit number, odd or even day. I think.
Yeah.
I'm not.
So it escalated
yeah.
through those things.
So, but it was a gradual, like, so when the world heard Wuhan is in lockdown, that didn't mean everyone was inside their homes, nobody was leaving. It was time before that happened. Not initially, no, not initially. It was, I was there, and it seemed relatively gradual to me. But one of my benefits was that because my girlfriend was Chinese, she could read everything, both kind of what the population was saying on Weibo and stuff, and what the government was saying. And sometimes they were not consistent with each other. So we get sometimes inside information before it happened, and then other times we get information from the government right away. Because when the Chinese government releases a statement, like they usually say like this will be enacted tomorrow, but in a crisis, they might say this is enacted now, kind of thing.
Right. Okay. So how long from that first declaration on the 23rd? How long, roughly, not to the day necessarily, did it take before it really became the lockdown that we later knew of as being, the strict lockdown? A week? Several days?
I'm really going to try to think about this before I answer because I honestly don't.
Okay, it's fine. It's not a big deal. It's fine. Yeah. It's not a big deal because I can find that out. But
okay.
So at some point then, pretty quickly, it became a total lockdown. So what did that mean?
So a total lockdown meant that you're in your apartment, not your friend's apartment, not your family's apartment. Like so, if you live with your family, you're in your apartment. No visiting of other people, like social visits.
Basically, you can't go out.
So no, you can go out. You can go out and throw out your garbage. Wear a mask, always, when you leave your apartment. You can go out and throw out your garbage. If there is some type of matter that needs to be addressed that can't be done over the cell phone with the security or with the community, because there are community WeChats. So, yeah, so that's how we got groceries and everything. It was amazing. But yeah, so if you, like me, I'm a foreigner, I can't speak Chinese, and let's say like my girlfriend's sleeping and I need to talk to the security guard because something just happened because I can't call 911, and, so I would have to physically go to the security guard who's there 24 hours, and I'd have to say, I have a medical emergency, I need to go to the hospital now. They'd be like, okay, show me your passport, blah, 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 and then they would let me leave. So when it was a total lockdown, it wasn't actually a total lockdown. You could throw out your garbage, you could leave your apartment, throw out your garbage, you could talk to the security guard if you need to. When it was a total lockdown, You could also go out to get your groceries. So community worked together, volunteers with the businesses, groceries were dropped off, you go out, grab the bag, go back in. So there was never actually a total lockdown in my personal experience, nor the experience of anyone I spoke to, and I have many friends who were in China and in Wuhan. No one experienced a total lockdown. That's why I'm doing this, because it wasn't actually a total lockdown.
Yeah, I've spoken to quite a few people during the time of who were here who did actually experience that. I think it depended on the compound that you lived in.
Compounds vary, yeah, absolutely, because, for example, if there are... So my compound, as far as I understand, had no cases of the coronavirus.
Right.
My, specifically, let's say my building, no cases ever came up. So, and so the moment any community gets a case, everything gets much more strict.
Right.
So I may have been in the opportune situation where nobody in the community caught the virus, therefore there was a little more leniency for our situation.
Did they come and check on you in terms of health?
No one to my memory came to my door because, so my girlfriend's a Chinese citizen. The government knows that I'm living in that apartment. There was no requirement for that. I don't know why they would, to be frank.
Because they were going around, I mean, there's tons of video from that period of police and others going around door to door and checking temperature, and in some cases putting seals on people's doors to make sure that they're not coming out, stuff like that.
Yeah, I've heard of all these stories, and I've seen some stuff as well. No one to my memory ever came to my door. And in my personal opinion, I had no need for it.
Well, whether you feel you have a need for it or not is kind of in this place is kind of irrelevant. If they decide,
what do you mean by this place?
Well, in China and in Wuhan, if they decide that they're going to go door to door and checking people's temperature, they're going to do that.
Yeah, I think if a country is going through a global, I think the world is going through a crisis.
No, I know. All I'm saying is that that's just the way it works. If an order goes out,
globally speaking, I would agree with you. Yeah.
But I think it's usually more strictly enforced here than in other places that I know.
Well, when a pandemic starts in Wuhan, or if a pandemic started in London, Ontario, or if a pandemic started in Germany, I think they
and all those places handle it very differently.
They historically,
they have handled
because
it
every pandemic is different.
But in this pandemic, every one of those places has handled it differently.
Yeah, yes, because every pandemic is different. We agree.
No, this pandemic, in this particular, with this virus, in this pandemic, all those places that you list off have handled it differently.
Absolutely, because they're different contexts.
Yeah, absolutely. And they have different rules, and they have different laws, and different ways of doing things.
Absolutely, different cultures and philosophies.
Yeah, absolutely. Anyway, my point is simply that okay, so you have that, and now you're basically inside, except for going for groceries, throwing out your garbage, or any other emergencies that you may have.
That was a really good way of summing it up, by the way, because I'm like racking my brain right now. I'm like, what exactly happened? And you just summarize it like a good journalist in about 3 seconds.
So how long did that kind of a situation go on for? Like
pretty long.
Days, weeks,
No,
months?
no. That went on pretty long. Like the duration of the lockdown was mostly like that. You only go out to go throw out your garbage if there's an emergency. Or whatever. But like, if I walked out of my apartment during that time, no one was questioning me, nobody was stopping me. Like, remember, walking out of my building.
Right. If you went wandering the streets.
No, you wouldn't, because the gates are controlled by security guards, right? So unlike Canada, because this is a CBC interview, we talked about this on the phone. Unlike Canada, most people live in houses in Canada. In China, and specifically Wuhan, I will speak to that context, it's apartments, right? So having a gated community with security guards is like breathing oxygen. It's the same thing. So if I wanted to try to leave the security guards, I would have to, again, have a medical reason or something, And if I chose to not listen to the orders of the government, and I chose to break the policy, then I would likely be reprimanded if I did that. But why would I?
Even arrested.
But why would I want to do that?
I'm not saying you would. I'm just asking. Just to paint a picture of what. Okay. So, as I say, so this goes on for weeks, months.
Well, I was in isolation within the context of our conversation for about 90 days. So the better part of 90 days was you only go out to throw out the garbage, you only go out to, whichever.
That's 3 months.
Yep.
What was that like? What was that like sitting in the same space for 90 days? I don't know anybody else in other parts of the world that's gone through that.
In hindsight, I'm really happy with the experience. I learned a lot about myself as a person. My relationship with my girlfriend was very solid. It was like we were growing as a couple in that experience, because what do you do when you're scared? Like when you're a kid, you hold on to your mom or your dad because that gives you comfort, and we had each other through that experience. So a lot of self-growing, a lot of growing within the relationship of my girlfriend. I also I did calisthenics, so I know like I said earlier, you're a very fit person. So something that I try to do is just push-ups, sit-ups. My diet changed because the groceries were like bought in bulk, so what we got was what we got, and I lost weight because I was eating the same type of Chinese food on a regular basis, and the Chinese food that I was eating is much more pure, like vegetables and meats and rice. Whereas if I had like a Western diet, which I would have all these options and I can eat more fatty foods, and so I lost weight. So I like, physically speaking, I lost weight, I got healthier. Mentally speaking, it was a much needed break for me. I was going through a lot in my life up until that point, because I don't think I told you this, but I was in Canada up until November 26th. And then I landed in Beijing, and then I transferred to Wuhan, and then like a month or whatever later is the coronavirus, right? So like, but my life was quite hectic, so this pandemic for me ultimately was a gift, and it actually allowed me, because I still got paid by my company, so it actually allowed me to reflect more, to meditate, to be physically healthier, mentally healthier, build my relationship with my girlfriend, learn more about myself in the process, save money because you can't go out, so you save money. I ended up making an emergency savings fund actually, that I never was able to create before. And because Canada made relief on student debt repayments, instead of putting money into that, I'd made that emergency fund. So that was critical for my financial wellness. So that's why I say the experience for me was amazing overall. Like and in the moment is different from my reflection of it, right? In the moment, it was like, when is this gonna end? Like, oh my God, we're playing puzzles again I'm watching Schitt's Creek. Oh, I love Schitt's Creek. If you read that article that I was in, I love Schitt's Creek. So we were watching, Dan and Eugene Levy doing their thing, and but yeah, there's only so much Schitt's Creek, and there's only so much Netflix until you get bored, and then so you got to come up with new things to do. But at the same time, I was kind of falling for the patterns and the consistency of things. There was enjoyment in that, because my life is so dynamic and almost crazy at times, as our lives can be. But it was a moment of pause, would be the simplest way to put it, which was mentally trying, but in the long term, it ended up being a gift for me.
I guess part of the tension, if there was at the time, is just the fact that you don't know when it's going to end, right? Like in hindsight, you can say it's 90 days, and you can plan for 90 days if that's what you know. Yeah. But if you don't know when it's going to end, you don't know when it's going to end.
You're right.
You're totally right. Or go back to Canada, or whatever.
Yeah, you're totally right. And that was in our minds too. Like, And I mean, of course, every day we were affected by that thought. Like, but what happens over time when you're in this kind of situation, for me at least, I can't speak to other people's experiences, but for me, you just let go. You just accept it.
But there must have been days when you woke up and said, "Oh, not again," and
Of
I
course.
wish I could go outside and go for a walk. On
Yeah,
a day
of
like
course.
today.
I mean, I'm a runner, you're a runner, and I miss running. Like, I miss running a lot. But that's why I did fitness. So how I handle my personal wellness is simply by coming up with things that scare me in my head. What are things that scare me, or what are things that are problems? But mostly it's fear-based. And then through using, I think, psychotherapy on myself. What scares you? Why does it scare you? And then my next step is like, okay, what can you do to make yourself less scared? So I hate the fact that I can't run right now. What do I do about it? Okay, I'll do push-ups and sit-ups. It's not running, but it's something. And I'm eating the same food pretty much every day. Well, change the way we make the food. Do different spices.
That all sounds very, very rational and very, very, but I'm just wondering. I mean,
I'm being honest with you. Like
I
I'm
totally
not
understand,
filtering.
and I'm not
filtering.
but,
Yeah.
but I just 90 days and you didn't feel like I'm crawling up the walls at any point.
Let me take a moment to reflect on that. Honestly, not really, because, and I had interviews with CBC, and I was laughing with the journalists. If you listen to my, I think it was The Current, I believe. I don't know if you investigated that, but it was a gentleman from Toronto. It was like The Current. It was something like that. And I was laughing as he was asking me questions, because I was really enjoying myself, and I was enjoying to talk to a Canadian in Canada, but to be honest, my friends in Canada were more scared for me than I was scared for myself. And you mentioned, were you crawling up the walls? Like the CBC journalist asked me, he's like, aren't you like counting numbers on the wall and scratching and I laughed at that. And I'm like, well, okay, I hear ya, because you don't know when it's gonna end. But the more I would allow myself to give into freaking myself out, the harder it would be on me to mentally survive from the reality that I didn't know when it was going to end. So I hear you when you say you're being very rational about this, but that's who I am, and I have I've documented my process through journaling and stuff, and when I do journaling, it's a stream of consciousness. It's not but and a big reason why I was not really scared was because the World Health Organization, in my personal opinion, did a fantastic job of sending communications, which gave me signposts of hope. What to do, what not to do, and all that kind of stuff. I don't get caught up in the hysteria and the fear that gets produced by this kind of pandemic, because that's who I am.
Okay, fair enough. So take that time then that you were in the lockdown, and the streets are empty, and obviously this place looks very different during that period of time. And then, contrast that to May, even April, June, July. Now, what's happened in Wuhan in that period of time?
A rebirth. That's how I would put it. There's a saying in Chinese that the Chinese people, it was really cool actually. It's touching me actually just thinking about it. People would come out to their apartment balconies and they would yell out to each other, "Wuhan Jiao," and it means carry on, keep fighting. And sorry, I'm getting a little emotional right now about this. I might need a moment before I can produce words again. So, What was your question? I don't want to lose track.
The contrast.
Contrast. Thank you. Okay. Focus on that. My answer was rebirth. So, basically, lots of uncertainty at the time. And I think as humans, what we scare the most is uncertainty, because we're scared of what we don't know. So there was that, I wouldn't call that negative, but there was that side of it, the uncertainty factor. So this is talking about then. But the response to that at that time was, again, like the Wuhan Jiao became like an emblem, it became like a slogan for, Wuhan carry on. And when people, like, every night at one point for like a week would go out to their balconies at 6 o'clock in Wuhan, in particular districts, and say, Wuhan Jiao, and you'd hear it from the apartment. So that sense of fear was smashed in some ways by that overwhelming sense of community. Today, that's why I said rebirth, because it really pulled us together. And I know I'm not Chinese, but I'm still here. I've lived here for 2 years. I'm a non-resident, I guess is the right word. But I felt more connected, and now that I walk the streets, and I mean, I'm talking to you without a mask right now. I always have a mask like this, always. There's no government mandate to wear a mask in Wuhan, but people choose to wear masks, unless you're in the subway. That's different. If you're in a mall, they might ask you because it's a higher concentration of people. But yeah, this is the most non-mask wearing I have seen actually in Wuhan, and I live here. But for the most part, just like this guy, he's wearing his mask. But what I do if I don't really want to wear a mask, but I do anyways, I just do this.
So you're wearing it more symbolic?
In some ways, yeah. So medically speaking, my understanding of things right now, based on my lived experiences and also on what I'm read on, is that there isn't any empirical evidence to suggest right now that I'm in a huge threatening situation.
No, that's right. But that's exactly what so.
Okay.
We don't need to get into the mask, the medical side of the mask stuff. But so you're saying it's a rebirth. Tell me that again. What do you mean when you say that?
Well, people say New York's a city that never sleeps. Well, you've never been to China before, because China is the country. China is the country that never sleeps. Like, if you go to the cities like Beijing, Shanghai, Shenzhen, oh my goodness, So basically, it was like stop, like go. But then the coronavirus happened. Stop. And then now we're back to continuing our lives again, but we're rebirthed because we do have the fear of the coronavirus within us, and that's different. We've changed that way. And also we are more connected now. I feel I'm crying in this interview right now with you, and part of the reason why is because I feel that connection, not just with my girlfriend, but with the Chinese people in Wuhan specifically, because we have a shared experience that other countries maybe didn't have at all. The coronavirus hasn't hit every country. So when I say rebirth, maybe on a personal level, I feel more sense of community, more sense of togetherness, more sense, we struggled together, So in a way, I feel like a greater sense of family here than before. So for me, that's a rebirth. But I also would argue when a Chinese person meets a foreigner and they learn, and this isn't actually an argument, this is a fact, whenever a Chinese person learns that I was here the whole time, they look at me differently because we went through the same thing. And we can talk about the coronavirus if we want to, but we never do. We just talk about our lives. We just talk about what we want to do. So the rebirth, I think, has not just affected me as a foreigner, but I think it's also affected Chinese people.
And so does that mean that, and you say people are still afraid of the virus, but when I look around, I don't see people acting very afraid.
Yeah, no, I said there is fear. Yeah, so I did say that there is fear of the pandemic, right? And the pandemic is still a pandemic. So that is correct, right? Yeah. World Health Organization still declares.
Yeah,
okay,
still
yeah,
pandemic,
yeah. So, when I say there's still fear, this is the first time I have ever seen massless people of this percentage walking around in Wuhan since the coronavirus. So I'm literally shocked. Mostly everyone at least is doing this.
But maybe they put it all behind. Maybe it just feels safe now.
Let's go with that thought. If they put it all behind and they feel safe, then wouldn't that fulfill your argument that masks are just symbolic and they have no medical purpose?
I'm just asking.
I'm just trying to connect the dots, like
no, but that's exactly what I'm saying. So maybe this environment has just left people feeling. Maybe this is what will eventually be the case everywhere, and that regardless of how you tackled it, people will just suddenly feel safe.
Yeah, feeling safe is an extremely essential human need, and we don't, like with the pandemic, once we've lost that feeling of safety as a world, it's hard to get it back. Trust, right? We're talking about trust. And we're talking about safety, which is Maslow's hierarchy of needs, right? But do Wuhan citizens feel safe? I mean, I know you didn't ask me that question, but if I was to ask myself that question, I would say that Wuhan citizens, when I talk to them, they say they think that Wuhan is one of the safest cities in the world right now. And I've heard this many times by many different people, and not just Chinese people, foreigners as well. Yeah. And personally, based on how I can understand things, I would also feel that way. And one of the reasons why I would feel safe is because I made a deliberate decision not to go back to Canada twice during the coronavirus, during the lockdown. And I wrote out exactly why. And everything that I said happened. So most importantly, what happened was I said, when a city anywhere in the world who has the ability to tackle their country in time of crisis, any city, as long as they have the resources to do so, they'll do everything in their power, I would think, in a perfect world that we don't live in. But I think they would do everything they could to try to prevent death, to prevent things from happening, right? So I think that's, in some ways, I don't think it's any different what we experience. So anyway, I'm kind of getting lost, but
so do you think that, I mean, when you and I know you're living here, so you're not experiencing the stuff in other places, but
you're right.
Directly, but when you hear and see that, numbers in the Torontos and in the United States, which is the more extreme, and in Europe, go down and then go back up again, and that there's never been the same level of a lockdown as you had here. Do you think that when you look at that, do you think that basically Wuhan handled this better
than the other countries in the world right now?
That's what I'm hearing from you.
Oh, sorry, are you asking me? Or are you telling
I am
me?
asking you that.
Okay.
I'm asking you, but
yeah.
I'm just saying that's the impression I'm getting.
Okay, fair enough. No. Well, let me reflect, because you've taken I've said many things, and you've simplified it into a very simple question.
That's why I'm asking you.
Yeah, absolutely, which is a huge part of journalism.
Right.
A huge.
But I want to make sure I'm getting that right.
Yeah,
so,
yeah.
So what is this the best way to handle it?
I'm going to answer your question like this. And you might not like my answer, but I think every country will do everything it can in the best way that works with them in their way. I think Canada is trying its best to handle the virus in its own way. I think China has tried its best to handle the virus in its own way. I would not say that the China way is the model that everyone should follow, because it's physically, structurally, infrastructurally impossible to do unless the communities replicate the Chinese, like Wuhan specific as an example, kind of way. And remember, the coronavirus in the villages in China were completely different than the coronavirus in Wuhan.
It was different in Beijing too, but
Yeah,
yes.
but you can compare Beijing and Wuhan more so as cities, structurally speaking. Chinese cities are very consistent in how they go.
True, but Beijing
But you
never
can't-
locked down the way that Wuhan did.
Of course, but you can't. But I'm not talking about that. I'm talking about the structure. You
Okay.
can't compare a village of
Sure.
farmers.
Okay.
So yeah.
But if we're talking about and you're being diplomatic about it. But
No, I'm
if
not.
you-
I'm giving you a straight answer.
No,
Like,
but you're saying every country handles it in the best way that they.
but I'm not doing it from diplomacy. Pragmatically speaking, when you have a pandemic, you need to make pragmatic decisions. It's not about ideology.
But some would argue that in the United States it has been about ideology. And anyway, I don't want to focus on the United States, but my point is simply that I'm just not sure that the rest of the world would put up with what Wuhan put up with.
I would agree with you, because why would China do what Canada is doing? Why would Canada do what China is doing? Exactly. No medical expert who works in the area of pandemics would ever say, listen to the World Health Organization, which I know you do. You're a journalist and you're covering the pandemic right now in this conversation. The World Health Organization never said replicate China. They never said that. They would never say that. That would be a stupid and careless thing to say. No,
They've
it would.
come pretty darn close.
It would. It would be very careless to say replicate China.
Well, they've come pretty close. But anyway, that's
But
another whole other argument.
but we could go into the details, which
Yeah.
you don't want to right now. But we could go into the details of what they're saying. These are medical global experts who are trusted diplomats. They are diplomats between countries. Their job, this is a personal opinion. I see the World Health Organization. There's two sides. There's the medical stuff, and there's the communications, the journalism. The PR, they have to represent many countries. They are the biggest multinational organization in the world, and they're bilateral all over the world. So when they make a choice, they're speaking on behalf of all of these countries as best as they can, if you believe in the UN.
Fair enough.
So there would be specific reasons why they would say, you should do this.
Yeah.
And if China happened to also do it, because they did it and it worked, they would have a reason why they are encouraging people to replicate. But when valid and reliability, you learn this basically in it's science. If it's valid, so did it do what it should do? Yes or no? Great. Is it reliable? It might not be reliable across the country. It might be valid, but it might not be reliable. So that's why I'm giving you pushback, because you can't say Wuhan did it best, no one did it better, and everyone should replicate Wuhan. No, that would be a reckless thing to say.
So what lesson can we take from Wuhan in the rest of the world? Not just Canada, but in the rest of the world. What lesson can we learn from this?
I'm really glad this isn't live, because it allows me a moment to reflect.
Exactly.
Crises are going to happen. They always happen, come and go. They will always come and go. But I think that remembering that we have each other and that we can fight through things together, and we not all of us will survive. That's a fact. Millions of people have died from this virus. It's terrible. It's terrifying. It's horrific. But the fact that we have each other, as long as we live, we have each other. And even for the people who are by themselves in their apartments in lockdown and were isolated, they still have social media. Thank God for social media during the coronavirus, right? So we have the tools and resources now, thanks to technology and other things that were invented by people from all over the world and used, that help us to have that sense of community. So what can the world learn from Wuhan? I think that, and they're doing it, don't forget about that sense of community, because when things go wrong, you lean on each other, because evolutionarily speaking, it's how we survive. It's a greater chance of survival is not being alone. So I think that sense of community, that sense of togetherness, that sense of camaraderie, what's solidarity. These are all things that that can help us survive. I think that's how I would answer that question. Do you feel like I've answered your question?
Sure. I don't mark your questions. I just.
No. But you also said I was being diplomatic earlier, so you do actually have comments and thoughts about my questions.
Yeah. No, about your answers.
About my answers,
yeah,
correct? Yes.
Yeah. No. Well, I mean, if you come across sounding in a certain way, I just want to make sure that that's how you want to sound. So fair enough.
How people interpret what I say is up for them to interpret.
Yeah. But I want to present it in a way that is because of course they're not going to hear this whole thing, as you say.
Yeah.
So they're going to hear a small section. So I want to make sure it's presented the right way.
Yeah.
Anyway, that's fair enough.
Yeah. No, but it's just like I said, solidarity, togetherness. I think those are the things that we need to remember in times of crisis.
Sure.
We have each other.
Okay. Sounds good. That sounds great. Yeah. Yeah. Just stay right there, and we'll. So move this in.
Is this going to be which program in CBC is this going to be released on?
This is going to be part of a. I'm doing like a mini doc for the National. I'm also doing something for radio. For
what's it
World
called?
6.
Because CBC used to air documentaries that you could also stream online, and they were they were investigative journalism and stuff.
No,
you know?
this is not one of the documentary shows. This is the National, basically.
Okay. So this isn't news. This is documentary.
Well, it's news in the sense that the National is a news program, but we have longer stories on the National, which I guess you could call mini documentaries, whatever you want to call them, or longer news stories. Anyway, so this is going to be one of those, and it's going to be on the National, and it'll be on radio. It'll be on, again, slightly longer, although maybe not quite as long as the TV version, on World at 6. And there will be an online version, because that's just the way we do things now. But I work for CBC News, so there isn't much in the way of like solid current affairs these days on I mean, the long form investigative stuff. There's the Fifth Estate and a few programs.
The Fifth Estate, I loved that documentary.
There's a Fifth Estate. There's also another program called what used to be the Passionate Eye. I don't know if it's still called that. Anyway, basically, they would basically run the best documentary, long documentary.
Passionate Eye did one on India, right?
Sorry?
I believe the Passionate Eye did one on rapes in India, I believe.
Well, they don't do anything. What they do is they find what they assess to be the best documentaries that are being done around the world, and then they will put them into their 1 hour or whatever it is, hour and a half, I don't remember anymore, format. Yeah. So it's basically just making some of those documentaries accessible, because otherwise you would never see them. Yeah. Unless you went to a festival like Hankou. Yeah. But no, that's interesting. That's interesting. Now, did your girlfriend have a different reaction to all of this than you did?
She was more scared.
Was she?
Yeah. Yeah.
Because most Chinese that I've spoken to were more scared.
Yeah, she was more scared.
And many of them considered that a nightmare.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I think part of the reason why she was more scared, one, we're very different people in the way we think. Like you now that you've talked to me for however long it's been, I have my own way of thinking, and those are based on principles and scientific method and other things. Psychology is my background, it's my master's thesis. So we're all different. We all think differently, but I just have my own way. So anyway, she would be obsessed with local news. And local news is not news. Local news, like it's not news like CBC news.
Like reliable news.
No, it wasn't about reliability. No, it's not what I mean. Like basically, social media now is not necessarily intended to be, but it's an information source for people, right? So when she would call it local news, but what local news was WeChat and Weibo and TikTok. Anything that like the people from the ground would express through these platforms is what she got more hooked on. The good thing about it is that the expression through these platforms is not centralized. It's not as controlled, and so you'll get different perspectives from people, right? Like the reason why, you might know this, because you brought up the welding the door twice thing. Did that video come from a Chinese citizen, or did it come from a foreign citizen? Do you know?
Most of the videos that came from Wuhan during that period were Chinese.
Okay, so and that doesn't surprise me. That makes sense.
Most of those have also long ago disappeared.
But in the West, if you want to see it, you can see it, right?
Sure.
Yeah, so I have VPN, I can look it up. I wouldn't say that on national television.
Technically speaking, VPN is not illegal.
Is not illegal.
Technically speaking.
Oh, really? Sure.
The implementation. It's not technically illegal to use VPN. However, people have been hassled, maybe even prosecuted. It's hard to depends how you define it for using it, for accessing foreign sites. But technically speaking, VPN is not illegal. Anyway, this is part of this gray zone thing that applies in so many different areas.
I never heard that before, so that's very fascinating to hear. I'll have to look into that more. But yeah, so...
But they would never is a strong word, but as a foreigner, it's highly unlikely that they would hassle you for using VPN.
There's the odd article that pops up. It's like, foreigner uses porn on VPN, and he gets arrested and charged all this money.
But that's the problem with it. That usually if you get like hassled, I don't think anyone is actually arrested per se, but fined, for instance, or whatever. Very often these things are implemented under other laws, right? You've got this picking fights and causing trouble.
I have to ask a question. I've been recorded this whole time, right?
Yeah, but I'm not using the audio for this. I mean, it's just going to be like...
Okay, just because like I just said publicly I'm using VPN.
Okay, it's not going anywhere. No, but my point is simply that there's all kinds of, like you can, there's this law that's often used in China, which is picking fights and causing trouble. That's basically what most people who online... Can
I take my mic off?
Leave it on just for the way it looks, that's all.
Oh, okay.
Just leave it there. So there are things in China that they use to go after you in different ways. But anyway, to get into different topics.
Yeah, because we were talking about my girlfriend's perspective. So,
exactly.
Yeah,
that's what I'm curious about.
Yeah, so she was scared. Yeah, no, she was very scared, and it was because she was like taking to heart and believing almost a lot of what was being said on social media. And I'm talking Chinese social media. Sorry, I have a bit of a headache. So, my job in that context that I took on
was to be her therapist.
Well, it was to console and comfort because she was scared. Because when someone's scared, you don't want to be not apathetic. You don't want to be not empathetic. Yeah. You want to be supported. You want to be like, hey, like it'll be okay. At the same time, I did not want to enable her looser thoughts that would go into fear-based areas where somebody said whatever, and then she's like, oh my God, it must be true. I'm like, you don't know that. Someone's just using a social media platform to say whatever they want. So like, how do you know that actually happened? So we actually had arguments, and this is where maybe it was a value clash, or maybe it was an ideology clash at a very high level. But I remember she would say, how are you doing for time? She would say things like, oh, this is gonna happen. This is gonna happen. This is gonna happen. My reaction to hearing her tell me that, because I'm not in the Chinese space, right? I'm not in the Chinese space.
Right.
So, and I don't read Chinese, is basically what I'm saying. So I'm not reacting to every single thing that's being said that could be scary. So
you're getting it double filtered because in many cases it's coming through her.
yeah. So she maybe is representing only the terrible things which we do as humans. That's how we're hardwired in our brains. Emotions first, reason second.
Right.
So I tried to support her and simultaneously be like, well, let's wait and see. I think that was the best answer I could give. Like that's really scary to hear that. Let's wait and see what happens. Because
for a lot of Chinese, it was a genuinely scary experience.
Yeah,
a lot of them describe it as a nightmare, and whether all of it was true or not, the simple fact that they were locked up in their houses for
who was locked up in there? Oh, you mean like their doors were shut? You mean?
The doors were shut. In some cases, the doors were literally sealed from the outside, and they couldn't leave during that time. If people were suspected of actually being infected, then basically that's what they did.
Is that a validated fact?
It is.
Okay. So how?
Was it widespread?
How? No. How is that a valid? Because I saw the videos too.
Right.
Like I'm not questioning the videos.
There were videos. There were multiple instances of similar videos. There were. I mean, basically, the government essentially, at different times, confirmed that if you were suspected of it, that those family units would be sealed off. That happened.
So you saw Chinese government,
yes,
Chinese government information that said we will weld your door shut.
Well, they didn't say we will weld your door shut. What they said was that if there was a suspected case in a unit, a family unit, then that place would be sealed off, and people would have to go in, would have to stay in there.
So what does sealed off mean?
Well, in some cases, it definitely meant locked up.
Okay, so then there's a correlation between someone welding a door on a video and that there is an assumption that there's a family in that unit of that video.
I've been here for 5 years. I know what Chinese people say.
I'm not questioning that.
Great. I know when officials say certain things, what it usually means. I also know the flow of information in this place, and in fact, you are able to distinguish very often over time, and especially with hindsight, what was rumor within a certain area and what is corroborated. These things were corroborated not only by Chinese citizens with videos, but also by foreign news agencies that happen to be here, and by government officials who essentially said, not in exactly specific those words, but essentially what they were doing. That's good enough for me.
So there wasn't any causal evidence, but there were correlations.
I don't know what you mean by causal evidence.
What from a scientific perspective, which is where
did somebody analyze the weld?
No, it's not that. No, you're taking it way too far. Out of context. I'm saying so for example, if there was a video that showed...
It's not just based on a video.
That's my point. I know, but that's why the world blew up. They saw people being welded. You brought this up twice.
Right.
My friends at CBC and other areas said everybody brought this up.
Yeah.
Because you have to understand...
It's been shown that it happened.
There's a difference between perception and reality. That's my point.
There is a difference between perception and reality, but when a door is welded shut, and we have other evidence that says that it's to keep people inside during a pandemic, and the goal of the government is to keep people inside during a pandemic,
so is this
as stated by them.
I'm happy to continue this conversation, but is this interview still going, yes or no?
No, it's not the interview. He's just shooting some general pictures of the two of us talking.
I used to work in an advertising company, so I understand pretty well, yeah. So, anyway, I think we may agree on this, but we would have to have a deeper conversation to find out.
Maybe so.
Or we may disagree on this, but we would have to have a deeper conversation to come there.
Absolutely.
But regardless,
I'm not here to change your mind. You have your perspective, having lived through it. I have my perspective, having lived in the same country and lived through part of, the pandemic as it emerged in China as well. My perspective being in Beijing is going to be different than yours. My perspective being a journalist is going to be different than yours. Yeah. My perspective based on a bunch of things is going to be different than yours.
But science and facts and cause are not debated.
Well, sometimes those are difficult to trace, and that's part of the whole
Fair.
problem with
with
the World Health Organization, which basically handed the job of tracing the roots of this pandemic to the Chinese.
Why would they do that?
They did that.
But
I don't know why they did.
No. But
they did that.
Isn't the answer in the question?
No, exactly. They did.
No. But isn't the answer in the question? The United Nations has no right to tell countries what to do. They can never tell countries what to do.
Absolutely.
But
if you have an international examination over how something like a pandemic starts, then the normal thing is not, based on other investigations that have been done, to hand it to the one country that is denying basically what the rest of the world believes. And whether that's true or not.
What was that?
What was what?
What you just said. What was denied?
The rest of the world believes that it started here in Wuhan, that it started in the seafood market.
No, as far as we understand, scientifically speaking, yeah, absolutely.
And China has denied that.
Do they deny that to this day?
They deny this to this day. They have had spokespeople who blame the United States for now coming in here and planting the virus.
So is there a written evidence that this has happened? That the government, because when the government, as you know this better than me, like you said yourself, you've been here for 5 years. So when the government makes a statement,
yes,
that's a declarative statement.
That's a declarative statement on behalf of the government of
So
China.
has the government declaratively said that it did not start in Wuhan?
Yes.
Okay.
And that it started by Americans who came in here and planted it.
That's fascinating to me.
I can point you to the clip if you like.
Please. The other thing too is that the nature of viruses are virtually, and this goes back to, because I asked you about cause and facts, and
Disturb you for a second.
I asked you about cause and facts, and you pushed back on me. So, and to agree with that school of thought, or that direction you were going in, rather, is that they're very hard, like you said, they're very hard to actually trace. Like, you're a journalist, not a scientist, right?
Right.
And your job is to rely on the credibility of said institution to provide you with information in order to share.
Not necessarily institutions, but they're part of the mix.
It's part of it. Individuals and institutions. That's all we have.
Right.
There's nothing else. Associations and individuals. That's it.
But I think more the individuals than necessarily the institutions, but sure. I think the WHO through this has shown itself to be quite political. It has shown itself to be on China's side.
They
are
disagree with this. Group.
And
well, hold up. One thing at a time.
And many scientists that I've spoken to personally do not believe what the WHO has been saying. Because even as this stuff was going on here, it wasn't until late March that the WHO said we should be wearing masks. So.
And the WHO is giving science-based reasons why there was
and that was about a month after most scientists in the world were saying the same thing. So that's an example.
But again, I wanted to say this because this is not a point of disagreement at all between us, because facts are really hard to go by, even in a pandemic. You have to. Scientists make assumptions. PhD scientists who do, so does the WHO. Yeah, everybody does. Yeah. Humans do. That's an undeniable fact. So if I was to entertain the argument that the virus did not start in Wuhan, nobody can actually right now, as far as I know, unless the Bilderbergs or the conspiracy theories want to make something. I have yet to understand of any evidence to suggest factually that it did or did not start in China, because to actually trace that would be very hard, because viruses are correct me if I'm wrong, are airborne.
Right. So the first thing so basically what we have to do is we have to say, where did it first appear?
Yeah. So
in fact, the first cases are all traced to the seafood market.
Yeah, and
so we don't know what happened before that.
And as far as
it may have been a bat that flew in here from Saudi Arabia. As far as we don't know any of that. There's no evidence.
You're right. It's like and you made a comment and you said maybe you'll disagree with me. I don't remember what you said, so unless you remember, but anyway. But like at the end of the day, just like you being a journalist, just like countries, everybody has their own self-interest. National interest, self-interest, whatever. It's one and the same. And obviously in some cultures and countries, self-interest or national interest are similar. And in a country like America, you could argue, or Canada, there's more duplicity of interests, right? You could say that. You can make an overly simplified argument and say that the Chinese government, I'm getting lost in my own train of thought right now. Anyway,
they have their own perspective, and they have
oh, sorry. I wanted to say, what I want to say is, like, we all have jobs to do, but we also have self-interest. So we're going to do what our job is, but we're also going to do what we can to make ourselves better in that thing, to benefit ourselves to a degree, because we have to. That's how we survive. So you're not going to get the facts of where the virus came from exactly, because that would be virtually impossible to trace. And you're
someday we may know, but
right now, as far as we know, and I don't disagree with this at all.
Yeah.
As far as we know, it started in Wuhan, the seafood market. And don't get me wrong, I'm not someone who's trying to make up a conspiracy theory here. But I'm just saying, when we talk about, like, when the media chooses to release something, that's a choice. When journalists,
it's usually based on the best information that we have for whatever reason.
Yeah, and in Canada we have freedom of the press.
Right.
In America we have freedom of the press. That's the ideological idea. That's the value. That's the charter, right? But there's also politics involved in your job. You in theory can say whatever you want, but the way the charter works is that you're an individual in a society. Law is individuals and the society, the tension between those two things. You're a journalist as an individual, but you work for a company.
My company doesn't tell me what I'm going to say about this story.
But if you said something,
if it was factually wrong, then they would come down on me for sure. But if it's not factually wrong,
I wish I'm not saying you personally, but I want to agree with that as true for Canadian journalism, American journalism, Chinese journalism.
Come back and talk to me in 20 years. Okay.
Okay.
Watch journalism for 20 years. Come back and talk to me, because I think that like I've been watching this from the inside, and also as a consumer of journalism.
Yeah. You have so many experiences I have never had.
So my point is that I've compared it from both sides, and it's very nice to have a theoretical discussion and to have what we didn't used to call conspiracy theories, but now I think is fair to have that name. That the media somehow has one narrative, that the media somehow has a corporate agenda, that the media has, these are all different conspiracy theories, not necessarily the same one, that the media somehow comes out with a particular thing. They're wonderful theories. They're effectively conspiracy theories. They're effectively conspiracy theories because there aren't many journalists that I know, in fact there are none that I know, that are told by their company what to present.
So when Hala Gonaim from London, Ontario at CBC tells me, as a Muslim woman, and which is really irrelevant to what I'm about to say, but just she is a Muslim woman, the identity is somewhat different, that she's told by her editors that she needs to write things like the plight of Indigenous people, the struggle of Indigenous people.
I'm not aware of that.
No, I'm not saying you are.
I don't know.
But you're saying in your experience it's never happened, which shocks me.
In my experience, the CBC's never come to me and said, you have to present this in this way.
Which shocks me because an individual who works at CBC still told me a very different story about her experiences as a journalist.
The CBC has several thousand people working for it.
Yeah,
I can't vouch for every single one of them, nor have I spoken to every single one of them.
So you can't argue.
But I'm telling you what my experience is.
Yes, and you can argue that 100%.
I can, absolutely.
Yeah.
And the people that I know.
Yeah.
I don't know.
And I'm frankly, I'm impressed to hear that from you.
I do not know her. I'm simply speaking my experience, both as someone who works there and as a consumer.
But at the same, so like you said, you've looked at things from both sides.
Absolutely.
Yeah, and
of course.
And many sides, I'm sure, because journalists hear so everything is a different story, right? I guess the question I would ask, and I'm respectful of your time, and I'm sure you need to get going. A question maybe I would leave you with, or is, how have you changed? Has your thinking, and please don't misunderstand the question. How has your thinking changed from the time you started journalism to now, like in the big picture? How you're thinking of the world, because you've been all over the place.
Yeah, well, every place that I go to, of course, gives me a new perspective and a new vantage point of the world. I don't know, it's hard to answer that question because when I started, I didn't know many of these same parts of the world that I later did. So how has my thinking changed? It's changed in some way. I mean, it's changed.
Big picture, yeah. Like, I mean,
Sure,
so fundamentally, yeah.
Of course,
yeah.
because you can sit in your living room, or you can sit here for that matter, and watch stories about the Middle East. But if you're not standing in the riots in Tahrir Square, or you're going into the war zone of Syria, your perspective is obviously going to be different. If you go to Afghanistan, it's going to be different with the troops.
Yeah,
right?
it's something you said to me, which is very, I mean, it was simple but very profound, was talk to me in 20 years, which could have been taken as a bit of a fuck off.
No,
I didn't take it as that.
No,
I didn't take it as that.
I mean. What I mean is that time gives you something to work on.
That was more of a joke. That was more of a joke.
Yeah, I get it.
But how I took that as I reflected on it, because I was reflecting on it as we were talking, what I reflected on, I was like, in 20 years from now, if we did the exact same interview, in this exact same spot, with the exact same questions, you're right. I would have different answers for you.
Absolutely. And you will look at China differently.
Yeah.
Just and many other things, I'm sure. But you will look at China differently too.
And the criticism.
A year from now, you will look at China differently in some ways. Maybe not fundamentally, but there will be those.
And the criticisms I get from my Canadian friends, the journalists that I keep referring to, is that they think I basically have a blind love for China. And when you were talking about conspiracy theories and stuff, like that idea that I'm up here, but I'm not down here.
Right.
Now, the irony of what they're saying is I'm physically in China. I live and drink and eat here every single day.
Yeah, but there are people who come here and do exactly what you're doing and eat and drink in whatever China, but who become progressively more cynical about China.
Yeah, absolutely. Oh no, I meet these
exactly
people.
the opposite direction.
Oh yeah.
So I don't think the fact that you are here is a bad thing. I don't think
No.
the fact that you are here necessarily means that you're suddenly becoming brainwashed, which is essentially what they're saying.
Yeah, absolutely. But I'm not denying. I'm not denying that the influence of the government and the culture completely has changed my mind.
Yeah, and it does. It doesn't. I mean, since we talked about how you get your news, and obviously you're not constrained by
No, I use VPN over.
Right. But the fact that you are here and looking at that other news from here, looking back at here, puts you in a certain frame of mind to
Totally.
look at that other news in a different way than you would if you were sitting in London, Ontario.
Totally. No, you're totally right, because I know when I, like, simple example, when I read London news, London, Ontario, 450,000 people, I'm like, oh, council, they're doing it again? I roll my eyes. But when I was in London, paying taxes in London, I was like, oh, what are they doing? They're not getting the high-speed rail, or they're not, you know. Anyway, you guys got to get going.
That's exactly right. That's exactly right. And
Yeah, it's fascinating that way. And I think that's what I would take away from what you were saying, when you've been to so many countries in all these years in journalism. Everywhere you go, it's like you shifted the perspective in that moment, in that time.
I would say you shift. What I would say is that you add layers. You add layers of understanding, and once you're at the end of it, if you're looking through those layers, it may mean that you see things differently. It may mean that you see things only slightly differently. It may mean that things are clearer or fuzzier.
I feel like you would have a very sophisticated and nuanced understanding of the world because of your experiences. I would think that. And maybe it's a wrong.
And also, I think you come away from all that realizing how much we all don't.
And that's what you learn in academia. That's one of the things that they try to teach you is, like when you do a PhD, you know very little.
Yeah, it always struck me when I was in the Middle East and literally watching the Arab Spring unfold day by day. You know, and then
Traumatized by someone else? Sorry, it's a personal question.
No, yeah, some of it's scarier than it's. Anyway, my point is simply that you're sitting there there, and sometimes it's important to get a historical perspective on some of this stuff, and so you get in touch with a world expert on something or another in academic in London or in wherever, and to talk to them about Egypt, and more often than not, you end up realizing how little you know, meaning me, about the foundation and the roots of things, and how little they know about what's actually happening on the ground at that level, because they're looking at it from an office and a series of books that were written 50 years ago. And meanwhile, the Middle East is like rewriting its own history as you watch, or whatever part of the world, doesn't matter.
What you're saying is very profound to me.
Because it's and these people I have total respect for, and they are like, I wish I knew all the things that they do and understood things the way that they understand them, but at the end of the day, I always felt that it's very nice and it's one of those long-range understandings that when it comes right down to it, it stops at some point. Maybe when they got their PhD, I have no idea, but it stopped at some point, and the world kept going. So, hieroglyphics, those are important things, but if that's all you're reading, you're not going to know a lot about today's world, right?
Yeah, no, it's a limitation to academics.
But anyway, I just think that's part of it. I think it's you learn stuff, absolutely. You learn in layers. It doesn't fundamentally, I don't think anything is fundamentally shifted my perspective where I sort of thought black and it turned out to be white, vice versa. It's all shades of gray, and it just happens to, it just adds from there. And I'm sure the same will happen to you. I know it, because it happens to everybody.
Yeah, I think as you get older, you tend to see life more.
Well, I think it's partly you're getting older, but I think it's partly the experiences that you have. And every single one of them adds something to your perspective and understanding of the place that you are in. Every China or Canada or the Middle East or whatever. It doesn't matter. It makes no difference. Anyway,
I feel like I can ask you. I mean, I know the interview was about me, but I feel like I could ask you a lot of questions about experiences. But thank you for your time.
Thank you for your time. This was amazing. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. Do you have any?
And I love Wuhan.
there you go.
You know what this means.
Yes.
I've been impressed. I mean, I have. As a city, it's been very nice.
And so do you?
I've never
been
been
in Beijing right now.
Yeah.
So that's the capital of the entire country. So
Right.
it's probably
Beijing
very
is obviously very different.
Yeah. I just I would think that China's putting all its best resources in Beijing because it's Beijing, right?
Well, resources, yes, but it's not necessarily the most representative. I mean, China's a big country. It's like saying, is Vancouver always at any point going to look like Toronto? Well, on a certain level,
the people wouldn't allow it.
right. On a certain level, it does, but on many levels, it does not. Same thing here. Shanghai is never going to look like Beijing. It's going to look like
Shenzhen, Hangzhou.
any of those places. Or anything else.
Do you enjoy your time in China?
Yes. The short answer, yes.
Yes. I understand it's a loaded question.
Yeah.
I understand. Yeah. It's hard for me to find foreigners who live in China that have the same degree of passion and excitement for China as I do.
Yeah, I've run into people who do, and I find that, and I don't prejudge, but I find that fades. It doesn't mean that you suddenly become cynical and negative on China at all. But
Maybe I become more balanced. Yeah. I think that's it.
And
I'm aware that I lack balance.
China's
in
a
my
very
perspective of
complex.
China.
China's a very complex place, and we all tend to oversimplify it in our minds, and sometimes in our work, and in the case of
What we do.
but that's how we need to do it, and it's a very complex place, and I think that every experience that you have here will change
Layers.
perspective.
Exactly.
It's all layers, and for better and for worse, and reinforce reinforce things that you already believe and change your mind on other things. But the place itself is also changing. So the perspective you have today may in fact be right on many levels, but it may not be right to you.
You're from outside Asia. Yeah. I can talk to you guys forever. I'm too much of a social. Apologies for taking your time.
Yeah, no problem. I have a question for you, Mark. So, every time I go here, I see more this kind of vibe areas, like relax, bars, whatever.
We're trying to be more like Europe and Shanghai, I think.
It's a little Shanghai.
Yeah, we're trying. We're not. But oh yeah, I was at a banging club last night. I didn't want to tell you this. So if you felt at all during the interview there were points where you wanted to punch me in the face, maybe it had something to do with the fact that I was hungover. Anyway, so are you looking? You guys are gonna have a good time tonight?
No, it's not. He's just curious about the place.
Oh, okay.
So what is like downtown? What is like bars?
So, like most cities, the central areas are business areas where all the money's at, right? And then they build around that or around the water. So Hankou, which is where we are right now, this is an example of a very open decline area, but then there are areas, sometimes they're totally scattered where they're clubs. They're not connected. They're not like clubs. But we have districts and we have spatters of like random things. So for example, there's a cocktail lounge I love going to. It's a cocktail. It's cozy, relaxing, it's like only Chinese, so like there's no foreigners gonna bug me, talk to me, and I love it. But it's in a community that it's like it's in a relatively central area of that. Right. What? You know? So sometimes in like Devil's Brewery is an example of a pub. It's an American-owned foreign enterprise. And it's a pub and smokehouse. But it's in a business district. It's nowhere near like really walking subway, yes. But you can't walk to the next door. It's surrounded by stores and malls. So we have both.
There is something that
Wait, hold up. Wait, how do you know? You know even what's going on. How do you know each other?
Because we're all for media, I know.
Wait, all right, freelance?
No, I work for French TV.
Also for
French TV. Oh, okay. Okay, cool. Hi. I'm Vijay. Hi. Hey, I'm sure you guys seriously need to get going. And you guys know I can talk forever. Should we exchange WeChat?
Is this yours?
This is mine, and I'm leaving.
okay.
You can take it. Thank you. I know.